tonight, he's back.
It's time to retool. It's time to say, where is the next opportunity?
Tony Robbins, here to change and inspire your life.
Life's not about me, it's about we.
The secrets to success.
That's all business is. Add more value than anybody else does, and you'll have a chance to win.
Overcoming stress.
Happiness is not here every moment, and happiness isn't all it's cracked up to be. Meaning is.
And keeping America great.
Our celebration of initiative and enterprise, our insistence on hard work and personal responsibility, these are constants in our character.
We used to be able to have a dialogue, and today it's, you're right, you're wrong.
With inspirational stories and people that you'll never forget. The moment that you were shot, what goes through your mind?
You just got to get away.
I went to combat, 4 times, but I count my life as my 5th combat.
I haven't found any place where the human spirit is limited.
Tony Robbins for the hour. This is Piers Morgan Tonight. Good evening. In a week that President Obama was sworn in for the 2nd term, America's facing the next 4 years with great promise and much uncertainty. It's been a rough time for the nation with the struggling economy, Hurricane Sandy, and the tragedy, of course, in Newtown. America's looking for answers and for hope, and Tony Robbins is one of the best guys I could think of to give us both of those things. He's changed lives around the world. Now he has a message for you and America. He's brought some rather special guests with him this extraordinary hour. Tony, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
I can't think, as I said, of a better guy really to have here, because I get a feeling, it's a really overriding feeling, that America is hurting right now. America feels vulnerable, fearful, and you see this because of the gun crisis.
Yes.
You see it because of the financial crisis. There's just a crisis of confidence generally amongst Americans. Do you feel that, and what is the answer?
Well, there's no single answer. I mean, you're not going to change the world overnight, but you can change yourself. And I think that the biggest challenge that we face is we're not just missing our confidence because we're out of control. We're missing our confidence because we need to retool. The world has changed. And most people say you got to deal with change. Change is automatic. Progress is not. If you're going to make progress, you and I have to develop more than just self-confidence. We have to have self-discipline and self-control. We're part of a culture that for decades has taught people, reinforce your kids for whatever they do and build up their self-esteem. You can't get self-esteem from somebody else. You have to earn it from yourself. Self-esteem is esteem from yourself, and you only get that by pushing yourself to do things that are incredibly difficult. When you have discipline and self-control and a sense of confidence or certainty, that's when people are able to change their lives. And our country has had a series of events that has produced enormous uncertainty. We need to retool, not just get more confident.
I mean, on the positive, some of the great periods in American history have followed extremely bad periods, post the Second World War.
Yes.
FDR, the country's on its knees,
yes.
and he rebuilt America,
yes.
and in spectacular fashion. So there is a precedent, and it's not like this is the worst time America's been through, not by a long way. So I think perspective probably has to be brought into this, right?
It's perspective, but it's also understanding that there are seasons, and every season gives different benefits. Every season has different pains or problems. If you were born in 1910, by the time you were 19 years old, it was 1929. As you were coming of age, people were jumping out of buildings. By the time you were 29, it was 1939. The world looked like it was going to end with Hitler going. That group of people who went through that developed emotional muscle. Not just intelligence, but a readiness that allowed them to change the world. And I just think this is our season for development. That's not being just positive, it's just saying, here's the truth. When trauma happens, it either destroys you or it drives you, and we have to make the choice of what we're going to use it for.
Let's take a listen to something that President Obama said at his inauguration speech this week.
A decade of war is now ending. An economic recovery has begun. America's possibilities are limitless, for we possess all the qualities that this world without boundaries demands. Youth and drive, diversity and openness, an endless capacity for risk, and a gift for reinvention. My fellow Americans, we are made for this moment, and we will seize it so long as we seize it together.
So the president there, sounding upbeat, but acknowledging that it's been a tough time and that there are challenges obviously ahead. How's he doing, do you think? Because a lot of this comes from the leader in terms of the spirit of a country, I think, in terms of its ability to resurge, if you like. Is Obama the right man? Do you like what you see from maybe the 2nd term Obama already?
I love the man. I voted for him originally, and I actually went to a meeting with 18 of the top tech executives, the guys that started Google and Salesforce.com, and And in the meeting, everybody was a big supporter. And I said, Mr. President, I love your heart. I absolutely believe in your intelligence. I know you care. I voted for you the first time, but I said, I'd love to know how it's going to be different. This is part of the election. When there's such demonization going on. I think that's the significant problem in our country. It's not one person. We used to be able to have a dialogue, and today it's, you're right, you're wrong. And that process happens in the gun debate. It's happening everywhere in this country. So I had a conversation with him, and I said, listen, if you think that the solution that you're telling me that you're going to do in your next term is that you're going to raise taxes on the wealthy, as we've done, I said, I'm more than willing to pay that. I'm supportive of that. But I said, that'll raise $80 billion. It's even less now because they cut it from 250, as you know, up higher as the cutoff date. So that'll run the country for 8 days. It's $10.4 billion a day. That's not even going to scratch the $1.1 trillion. What else are we going to do? And he said, well, I think what's going to happen is, the Republicans are going to have me to kick around. There's not an election, and we're going to start working together. I said, as long as there's demonization, as long as you're making them wrong and they're making you wrong, there's no chance of coming up with intelligent compromise. That is the single issue that's got to shift. And what's wonderful is the president afterwards, a lot of people, one man came and grabbed my hand and said, I think that's enough for this conversation. He said, no, Tony has given us some creative tension. And he pulled me aside afterwards and he said, I'd like you to come to the White House, sit down one-on-one, and let's talk about this, because you have to have a unifying message. We're missing that right now.
Like you say, I mean, everything has changed for America in the sense it was this great all-encompassing superpower. Now there are many rivals to that position, and that will only increase over the next few decades. And America has to respond, and it can't respond perhaps in the way that it would have done 50 years ago.
Well, in addition, I mean, the president has his hands full, to be fair. I mean, as he talked about the worst day of his presidency with Sandy Hook, I mean, he's dealt with things most people never have to deal with. But you're right, there needs to be a unifying vision. There's someone saying, Kennedy, we're going to go to space, or we're going to have this war on poverty. Right now, when our goals are to pay our bills, it's pretty hard to get people to find the greatest power of themselves when what they're aspiring to is depressing. And I think that's not just the president's fault. We individually have to find that, but it's true. Our leadership of our country has got to say, this is where we're going to go. It's painful now, but here's what we're going to get to. If what we're going to get to is we can pay our bills and we're going to be okay, that's difficult. To be fair to the president, I think when you've seen tears in his eyes, it's really been about the issue of really there being a future for young people, for the next generation. I think he really sincerely cares.
Tell me this, sir. What is this future going to be in terms of America incorporated as a business model? Because a lot of the things that America used to be great for, manufacturing, for example, they've changed so dramatically and become so global, you can't really just go back and do that again, even if you had the money to do it. America needs to find other business models, doesn't it?
Well, it is. It's in the middle of it. We're in the middle of that process. And honestly, on manufacturing, there's been growth primarily because we found these new technologies to bring us energy. We have more natural gas, as I'm sure you know, than Saudi Arabia has oil. So there's some changes. Some people are coming back here because it's cheaper to do business in America. But I think what's more important is the average American. The average American, if we're sitting and waiting for the government to come up with the answer for us, or the president to come up with the vision, you're going to have a problem. If you've been on unemployment for 12 million Americans, those jobs are probably not coming back. It's time to retool. It's time to say, where is the next opportunity? Is it in healthcare? Is it in green? Where am I going to go to get the skills? Because no one else, unfortunately, right now, and the government's going to step up and say, here's a pathway. So you've got to find it for yourself.
How morally responsible should big, successful companies, we've seen Starbucks do this, and we've seen Apple begin to dip its toe in the water, and I banged on about this a lot.
We talked about that last time I was on the show.
Right, and Apple since then have done something, but only a small thing, but it was a start. But it's about the principle, really, of great American companies, and in the tech world, I mean, they lead the world, but a lot of the stuff's outsourced outside of America. That doesn't really help the American jobs market, even though by being successful companies, they do in that way.
Yes. I think you got to look at it in a context, just like you're talking about looking back through history. If you and I were having this discussion 100 years ago, 40% of Americans were farmers. Today it's 2%, and we don't just feed America, we feed the world. When technology comes and displaces it, it's a chance for us to take those resources and redeploy them. What's missing is the leadership to say, here's where you got to go. The average person, listen, I donated 1 million meals last year personally, not my foundation. We've done 4 million meals together. I believe in helping people that are down. But if you take people for 2 years and you take care of them and you don't give them new skills, they lose confidence, they lose certainty. And I find that they're going to become institutionalized and not being able to be part of a new future. So I think our job is to say, here are the tools to help you get to the next level of your life so you can help create the new American Revolution.
When you talk about this transformation from post-traumatic stress in all its guises to post-traumatic growth,
Yes.
Which is an interesting phrase. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, it's actually a science, but it's not well studied. Not a lot of people. Most people know everything about post-traumatic stress, where someone has had a trauma and it severely affects them for the rest of their life. They have shakes or tremors or headaches. They can't sleep, nightmares. But there are people that have gone through the exact same trauma, and they found a way inside themselves to trigger that into a drive where they no longer are broken and where they heal. And when they do, there's three things that people find who they've done the studies on. If you make it to the growth side, where you're expanding and where you're able to deal with it, the number one thing is you find out that you're more powerful than anything you ever thought. You're bigger than any event, if you're still alive. Second thing that happens, you find out who your real friends are. You're not your Facebook friends. The people that care, that show up, and those relationships, Piers, they deepen. And the third thing is, it's almost like you have antibodies. You have this set of muscles that allow you to deal with things in the future. And what people do in that area is they decide, I won't be beaten by that, as corny as it sounds. They draw a line in the sand and go, I know if I continue down this road, my life's over. They make that decision. Then what they do is they find something bigger than themselves to go after, a mission. A woman loses her family member to drunk driving, and she starts MAD, for example, and now she's out there muzzling against drunk driving, making that shift. She has a mission larger than herself. And then they start stacking the small victories. And out of that, they get emotional muscle, and they're able to help other people.
Does it apply to any form of trauma, or are there grades of trauma?
I've seen it happen with people that have lost their children. I've seen it with people that have witnessed the death of people around them. People have lost limbs. So I haven't found any place where the human spirit is limited.
We've got a great example of that coming up. After the break, I want to bring out somebody who's a survivor of a high school shooting. He's in a wheelchair.
Yes.
He's an incredible story. He's a young man. I know that you've been working with him, and I want to find out what you think about this.